Hello, everyone. Like Adrian said, I am the activation manager here at Kerry, and I'm going to be kind of kicking us off this morning before I pass it over to my panel of experts here, kind of talking about stepping up in plant-based taste. And I know all of our meetings always run over, so I'm sure we'll have a few stragglers join us in the next couple of minutes. But just for the sake of everyone's time and just kind of honoring all of our busy schedules, just kind of giving you an overview of who Kerry is specifically. So we are a taste and nutrition company, which essentially says we sell ingredients. We are 18,000 different product ingredients across all different applications beyond just plant-based beverages and meats, plant proteins, confectionaries, the list goes on and on. But globally, we have this huge network of R&D scientists, application experts, marketers, manufacturing locations, and we're also celebrating our 50th anniversary, as you can kind of see by a lot of our backgrounds. But to Naturally New York, we are a newer member of the organization. We also have joined the Chicago and Boulder chapters. We're also getting involved with the Upcycled Food Association. So this mentor hour is kind of a result of that and kind of our new partnership and just kind of making new connections with this audience. So thank you guys for joining. We appreciate it. And this slide here just kind of, when we say an ingredient company, a global ingredient company with lots of different products, this is just a very high level overview that people kind of like to take a picture with of all the different places we're kind of playing in. Obviously not going to talk about any of these things today, but all of these ingredients are really driven by our growth platforms. Number one being plant-based, and that's why we chose that topic to kind of speak to you all about today. Taste, so making those plant-based products taste delicious, as well as all the other food products that we work with, combating food waste with food preservation systems. And then also we have a lot of investments in the health and biopharma place with a lot of probiotics, immunity ingredients, proactive health ingredients, etc. So this is just a good for your reference. But I know that we're not here today just to learn about Kerry, but we're here to kind of have an informal chat with our experts that are on the phone today. So I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and then we might turn it back to you guys to introduce yourselves as well, since it's kind of a smaller, more intimate group, and we can kind of gauge where you guys are at in your plant-based journeys. If you are in there at all, if you know nothing, that'll kind of help us have a really great conversation today. So I'll pass it over to Jenny to kick us off.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Jenny Palin. I'm the Senior Strategic Marketing Manager at Kerry Foods. I've been with Kerry for about 3 years, focused on plant-based in my current role in marketing strategy. And then prior to that, I was on our insights team and focused on researching plant-based consumers.
I'll go next. Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Hernan Angarita. I'm a culinary innovation applications manager at Kerry. I've been in the company for around 6 years, and my background before Kerry was on restaurants, specifically Michelin star restaurants and hyper fine dining in New York City. Got my bachelor's in culinary science from the Culinary Institute of America. Some of you might know that career as culinology, since several other institutions are offering similar programs. I've been working plant protein for the past 5 years, right in the boom of plant protein when it was starting up. And I lead Kerry's plant-based application team, which works with multiple collaborators within the company. These are challenging products to develop, and we have a team that does research and works closely with protein scientists, hydrocolloid experts, fat experts, and flavorists to make great tasting products.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Rabschnuck. I'm Business Development Director of Plant Protein here at Kerry. So really my job is to work with customers to help solve challenges and then bring in the technical experts like Hernan and our marketeers like Jenny and Amy where relevant. I've been at Kerry for about 1.5 years, and prior to this, I worked as Director of Corporate Engagement at the Good Food Institute, which works to accelerate the industry of alternative proteins. So very much excited to speak with you all today about the work that we're doing in plant-based, as well as just the work we do at Kerry writ large. Thanks.
So I know we have 4 people on the phone, and I don't want to call you out, but since it is such an intimate audience, if anyone wants to come off mute and introduce themselves, we would love that.
I guess I'll go. Sal Parco, I'm with JPG Resources, pretty much a consulting firm based out of Battle Creek, Michigan. And I've worked mostly in the cereal side of the industry, Kellogg's, General Mills, but having started with JPG Resources, have had the opportunity to do a lot of plant-based meat analogs, hamburger type, and chicken. So this will be an interesting seminar here.
Would anyone else like to introduce themselves?
I'll say hi. I'm Avi Khan. I'm on the road. I'm in a parking garage, so you might hear the baby. I'm waiting for my wife. But I'm a food broker at a brokerage in the Northeast. We do food service and retail sales representation, and we represent some plant-based dairy, plant-based meat, and some just like plant-based, just good old school plant-based stuff. So I just always want to learn what's on trend and what's coming around the corner, and nutritionals and all that. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carly. I do supply chain and inventory management for Monk Pack. We make plant-based keto bars. I personally have been pescatarian and explored veganism and vegetarianism as well for over like 12 years now. So I personally am very passionate and I'm excited to learn more.
Awesome. Well, thank you 3. We appreciate it. With that said, Jenny, are you ready to just kind of jump into our content then? Cool.
Ready to go. So before I go into a little bit of some research Kerry did, I wanted to just touch a little bit on the plant-based consumer. So when we look at who's purchasing, consuming plant-based food, the market has shifted, and this is probably not new news to anyone here, but before, we would have said it's primarily vegans, vegetarians. And it's just not anymore. The largest growing consumer group of plant-based foods is actually flexitarian, or even consumers who have no restrictions to their diets. And in all reality, a lot of those no restriction consumers are actually flexitarians, but they haven't made that psychological move to actually identify themselves with flexitarians. So you'll see on this chart here that actually 71% of plant-based consumers are consuming both meat and traditional dairy products. And I'll touch in a minute why that's so important. But this consumer group is really just looking for a different way to kind of get an edge in their health. They're not looking to make major drastic lifestyle changes, but really more ways to change up what they're eating to have a better for you diet. And you'll see when we look at this consumer set, they tend to skew slightly more women and tend to skew also more younger generations, like Generation Z and millennials. And then to the next slide. Thank you, Amy. So again, this is really a shift in who's consuming plant-based foods. Globally, we see about 42 consumers are flexitarians, and about 1/3 of the United States actually identify that. We see 53%, so over half of all US households have some plant-based foods in their kitchen. And globally, again, we see those reasons going to plant-based foods shifting towards health and sustainable initiatives. And guys, feel free, since we are a small group, if you have any questions as I'm going through these slides, speak up, throw it in the chat. I see one thing in the chat. Just let me know. Amy, if you want to go to the next slide. But again, in this category, taste remains a key challenge to adoption and barriers to entry for the categories. So in our research we've done recently, we saw consumers, these are direct quotes on what they were saying about plant-based burger and plant-based cheese. So everything from it's overpowering, it tastes bad, it's bitter, it's funky, it's got a lingering aftertaste, to really there's nothing on the market that I love. So again, key challenge in this category. You want to go to the next slide? So when we look at why consumers are going to the category, they're looking for edge on health and nutrition. However, they're still in that standpoint, and sounds like many of you potentially consume plant-based foods. You know, there's a moment where you go to eat some of the products and you have almost like a slight pause, whereas is it going to taste good? And when we think about our meat and dairy counterparts, most consumers don't do that when they go to eat a hamburger. They don't pause to think, is this going to taste good, unless they had a really bad experience. But in this case, we're still trying to earn the recognition of great tasting food. So how do we move consumers' mindset from this is just functional food that's helping me get an edge on my health to an emotional state of I'm craving that plant-based burger, and I'm going to pick on plant-based burgers today. How do we get that meat-free diet to not just be I'm looking for my meatless Mondays, but I want my deliciously meatless Mondays? And so that's what Kerry wanted to understand when we dove into our latest research, which I'm going to share with you guys, just high level what we found. So we literally stepped into consumers' kitchens. We spent about 6 months talking to consumers in 4 key global markets, the US, UK, Australia, and Brazil. And we tested 14 different burger brands. These are globally in different regions, different brands, and then 8 different plant-based cheese brands, and spoke to over 1,500 consumers. And what we really wanted to understand was what were some of their delighters when they ate plant-based foods? What were some of those pain points that they struggled with? And what were some of the unmet expectations that they just weren't getting with the products on the market today? So let's look at this. Let's see what we found out and unpack the complexity of this. So here's what we found. I've been asked this a lot. You know, when you're looking at plant-based food, are consumers still looking at the counterparts in meat and dairy? And we heard loud and clear, yes, they are. The benchmark is beef. But what we actually found is consumers expect much more than their beef counterparts. One of the consumers we talked to actually said, you're inventing basically a hamburger from nothing. So if you're going to invent it from nothing, why would you invent the same thing that I would get in a beef burger? I actually expect it to be better. And that's the consumer's mindset when they go into this category. It's not just even they expect it to mimic beef, they actually expect it to mimic beef and be better. So you'll see they're looking for those sensory cues that they would get in a beef burger. The juiciness, how you cook it, if you know it's done, the bite, the flavor, but they're going to these products because they're healthier. So they expect them to be healthier with better nutrition. So again, benchmark is beef, but we want it better. When we look at flavor, flavor really elevates that taste experience. So again, taste is king, and that's no different in plant-based food. And taste can really make the experience of a burger even better. And consumers really crave that meat-like texture. And I was actually quite surprised how well they could describe the texture of a burger and how they expected plant-based burgers to have the same meat mimicking texture as they would find in their beef burger. And then probably one of our biggest surprises we found in this research is the cooking process. When we watched consumers pan fry a hamburger, we saw some actually would take it with their hands and roll it on the side. They would flip it, they would cover it. And we found that consumers really were looking for those visual cues that they were used to in a beef burger. And this was across vegans and vegetarians, along with flexitarians. And they really didn't know. We heard frequently, well, it's vegetables, so it has to be safer than beef, right? And there just wasn't a lot of confidence in how they make plant-based burgers, if it's done, if it's safe, and a lot of confusion in the category. So now, Hernan, would love to punt to you. From your standpoint, how do you interpret some of this to make great tasting products?
Well, I think I love point number 4, that it's, I mean, that is true to anything that you're cooking, right? If you just let it sizzle in the pan for 10-15 minutes, it's just gonna dry out. But I think what is unique about specifically that insight is that people are looking for, even people that have adopted vegetarian diets, not only the flexitarian consumers, they're looking for the cooking cues that let's say their meat mimics would give you, and that is just another variable for the R&D side to that you not only have to develop for great tasting, great textural portion, and great flavor, but at the same time, it has to have the same visual cues. One of the biggest, I guess, takeaway that I get is the benchmark portion, the benchmark beef, but better. I mean, to tackle that on the R&D side, you have to break down and capture what the eating experience is. If anyone here has had a non-seasoned cooked 80-20 burger patty, it is overwhelmingly fatty, not particularly grilled, there's some aspects of it, not specifically beefy, but it's mouth coating fat and a taste of boiled blood. Now, when you go into, it has to be better, people don't want the off notes. They also don't want that overwhelmingly fatty aspect of it, right? Because they want all these products to be lower in salt, lower on fat, higher in protein, or at least similar to their meat mimics. So those are all variables that essentially you just have to tackle one at a time, but it's a balancing act at the end of the day. On the realm of flavor, and when I get feedback that, I mean, flavor is king, it has been for the past at least 3 years since we've been doing research, it has to be a great tasting products. I take that as a chef, I take that as, you see so many chefs going into the plant-based scheme, because it's not just mimicking the meat counterparts or just flavoring like meat, but it is all the fundamentals of culinary, balancing sweet, salty, sour, fatty, umami. You just gotta make it taste good. So I think what it boils down is, at the end of the day, it is a balancing act. You have tight resources in the amount of protein that you can put in there, the amount of fat, the amount of flavor, and you just have to play it by balance to kind of create the perfect eating experience. And I would target eating experience over a meat mimic any day.
Great, thanks, Chef. And let's look at, what are some of those building blocks? What do consumers look at when they rank it? And here's essentially what we found when consumers said, what is my ideal plant-based burger and how do you build it? So at the top of this chart, you'll see texture, and this is in hierarchy order. So the ones on top, consumers said were most important to them. So in texture, you see everything from bite, getting a really crispy outer edge, to even some of that soft inner, the juiciness, the succulence. And a lot of those descriptors are actually tied into some of the emotions, especially eating a plant-based burger. If you think about, we had consumers describing barbecuing and that first bite of juiciness, all the way down. And I won't talk through every one of these, but from taste to aftertaste, again, taste is king, and it's really important to get those great tastes in a burger, to how it's cooked, the appearance cooked, all the way down to Consumers found it important how they were handling and how the raw meat actually looked in a plant-based burger, to the smell, and then again, how it touched and felt. Anything here really stand out to anybody on the call or even chef? Anything here that really surprises you?
I can certainly chime in. I mean, that consumers ideally are pushing for the texture portion. I mean, that is huge. I've worked so many briefs in which the language is everything here, right? And everyone keeps telling you it needs to be beefier, it needs to be more grilly, it needs to taste better, right? But the textural aspect is so intrinsically tied to the flavor experience that if you don't hit on that, there's always going to be something missing. You can get really close, but something triggers in your brain and is not quite right. On the bright side, I certainly see that ingredients have pushed so much further ahead. We are so close to, at least on the form side, let's say burgers, meatballs, and anything that is maybe even tenders, to get really close to meat-like textures, and that they can still deliver on the fatty portion. And I love that also juicy and succulent are in the texture aspect. I mean, those people would confuse that all the time. So you got to fix the texture first. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, and we have someone obviously that kind of works in the cereal space and probably is working with those TVPs. So is there any thing about texture and kind of those base proteins that you could kind of shed some light on that helps with the texture and the taste from the very, fundamental portions of that base?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, Emmy. I think, TVPs, they've been in the industry for many years. And I've seen, or we've seen, a wave of specialized TVPs for the plant protein realm, which they have altered the density of the TVP, the protein content itself, also the cleanliness of the flavor. So there is not a one single answer of a TVP that will make you achieve a burger-like texture or a meatball-like texture. You have to look at it almost what is happening on their meat counterparts. I mean, when you are looking at a burger, you have pieces of lean meat. You have the cartilage portions, which are a little bit denser and chewier. You have the fat that is the rendering fat into it. So you have to account for parts of that. And those are all built with, in regular in animals, they're built with protein intertwined into them. So what you're trying to do is that these TVPs are substituting those kind of functionalities. So one TVP wouldn't just do it all. And some of the older TVPs, while they work for giving you some of the increased protein contents and maybe a shredding texture, certainly the industry is moving towards the specialized TVPs that give you that nodular feel and also extremely clean flavored now. They used to be pretty intense soy and pea-like. Now they have gotten much better. Does anyone out there, anyone has any specific questions around these lines? I mean, this line says quite a bit on what consumers are looking for.
Yeah, one comment I'll make, it is interesting to see taste come second, because everybody's always talking taste is king, but texture is almost that subconscious thing that can make you or make or break a meal. So I think that's a very interesting insight here. So happy to see it.
Yeah, and I would say too, think about consumers probably aren't always the best at articulating the two separately. So you're probably seeing some of that kind of mixed in here as well.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I was going to say, otherwise, I think we can move on.
Awesome. I'll tackle this one then, Jenny. So combating taste challenges, specifically on the research and development side. I mean, anyone that has worked on plant proteins, off notes, and I've talked briefly about it, off notes like cardboardy, beany, green, earthed, even rancid legume. You're working at the end of the day with the highest protein vegetables that are out there, specifically legumes, right? So not only you have to look for the quality of the TVPs and protein powders that you're using, or functional protein systems that you're using, but also the off flavors that they bring. And to tackle and that flavor challenge, you truly have to develop a lexicon behind it. Because between feedback from customers, feedback from consumers, and trying to develop, you feel like you're getting pulled from so many directions, especially on that comment on the taste portion being intertwined with the texture portion. And I want to emphasize the juiciness aspect, because sometimes people associate that more with the taste than they do with the texture. To tackle that, that's exactly what has been successful for us, is that the teams that have been working plant protein, we all have aligned into a lexicon, and it took us several years, 2 years on training to specific descriptors to understand how we can pivot from a flavor standpoint in these products. We've done extensive research as well on those off notes from different bases. So that cardboard beanie green that I was talking about, and how to mitigate those. Right now, several ingredient companies and flavor companies, we have a toolbox that can help mitigate, with obviously proprietary technology that can mitigate some of those flavors. And almost as a chef, it's kind of trippy for me, because it's ingredients that you can add into and they subtract flavor, which is, it's pretty wild. But it all comes down, it almost all the time comes down to how clean the base is. So you are dealing with trying to hit your protein targets, your functionality and textural aspects as well. Like many people think on the hydrocolloids will do the trick. Let's say methyl cellulose is the main one that everyone is currently using. There's only a few specialty products more on the extruded realm that do not use methyl cell. If you don't see methyl cell, I can almost guarantee that you'll see vital wheat gluten as the backbone of an application. And it's because those types of, at least that protein is extremely functional, and methyl cell is the king in maintaining that texture as it transitions from cold to hot. So again, you're balancing off notes, then the right textural delivery as you're trying to create the eating experience, and how that flavor lands. I get asked many times, can I just get one flavor system that is just going to taste like a burger? And the reality is that meat is not even like that. The lean portion will taste like something, and the fat portion will also taste different. So you almost have to approach it as, all right, I gotta get what my lean phase, I gotta get it as close as those beefy notes into there, or boiled blood notes as I can get them. And the fatty portion, let's use that one, and the natural rendering properties, let's say of coconut fat or cacao fat, or even canola. There's several canolas that are a little bit higher in melting points that you can probably blend with some flavored systems, and it will help as they render in the cooking process. It'll help deliver that flavored system. So there is not just a single answer here, and I wish there was, but certainly it is. You have to take into consideration that flavor in two different sides, fat and lean, and also that texture will impact massively how juicy your product is going to be at the end, and how craveable it's going to be. Now, I just unloaded quite a bit of information there. Is there any questions here from an R&D standpoint? Because it went through a lot. And I can geek out here as well. And we've been working quite a bit of plant protein, texture, flavor, you name it, we've worked it.
Chef, do you think it's fair to say, if it's a chicken nugget versus a chicken patty versus a breakfast patty versus a breakfast sausage, even crackers, even baked goods, all the different sauces and cheeses and all that kind of stuff, that, what is on the market now and what has worked, isn't what's going to work, in 2 months from now and 6 months from now. So how do you navigate, how quickly everything is changing? I think we commonly say this is the Wild West, both the plant-based world.
No, I see it. I saw the boom, but now you've set the expectations of the consumers, right? They saw that they can be better. Now they want better, right? They want the exact meat mimic. I would say highly analytical and also rely on specialty ingredient suppliers. I mean, there are companies out there specializing either on the fat portions, on the on functional proteins. It is too much information out there. So the reality is that at some point it's going to happen. The bar is going to keep raising up. And what I'm hoping is that the prices actually, I don't know if they even down or stabilize as production goes up. Because some of these, there are the ingredients that are very key to achieve some of the attributes that would take it to the next steps. The issue is that they might not be commercially feasible. I guess in short, I see the bar is going to move all across up, and whoever is not pushing to listen to the consumers and to pivot, I think it's going to get devoured by the brands that are listening.
Is anyone else on the line experiencing any specific challenges? Because obviously, every product has its own challenges, but curious if you guys are working on any applications or if anything's coming up as common themes for you guys. Well, that's good. You guys have solved all the problems.
Yeah, I think I know that the supply issues are definitely an issue right now, and I know with some of the new, as when we're talking texture, high moisture extrusion tends to be a good method to make kind of like chicken texture, especially, but the problem ends up being a lot of times capacity is like who has the ability to make high moisture extrusion type products for the industry. So I think it's more a supply issue than a technology issue anymore, at least this year.
All those lines are packed till the max, aren't they? Yeah, no, we certainly have seen that our side as well.
I think that's a good point. I also think that there's, and I would love to hear what people on the phone think about this, but a real lack of co-manufacturing expertise in the plant-based space. So I think both from the supply part as well as just the manufacturing perspective, there needs to be more focus. And I know that there are several investors in the US that are focusing on co-manufacturing specifically. So hopefully in the years ahead, we'll have more bandwidth there.
Well, Allison, while you're off mute, do you want to kind of move us into our next kind of section here?
Yes, can you go to the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think when people ask, really, what does the future look like with plant-based? We don't have a crystal ball, but this is our closest attempt at having a crystal ball. So, I think really one of the areas where we really are seeing a lot of growth, and we will continue to see growth, is just expanded formats. So I think what we mean by that is when you look at the entire plant-based marketplace, it varies depending on whether it's dairy or meat or whatnot. But the percentage that these products make of the total market is still quite small. So just for example, plant-based meat at retail still only makes up about 2% of all meat sales. Plant-based seafood makes up 0.1%. Plant-based egg is at 0.6%. So we're really very much, at the beginning stages here. While the marketplace was saturated with a lot of burgers those first years, especially starting around 2019, it seemed like every company came out with a new plant-based burger. We're now seeing, if anyone went to Plant-Based World Expo or Expo West, it's now all about plant-based chicken. And we think that we're going to continue to see more and more formats. We'll see more pork products. Already we see some dinner sausages that are new to the market. And again, that's just on the meat side. I think there's probably a lot to still come on the dairy side as well. And as far as availability, I think right now, most grocery stores do have, plant-based sections that are either segregated adjacent to the meat and dairy counterparts, or they're off on their own in a plant-based section. I think on the retail side, retailers were definitely sideswiped by COVID. And so there had been an attempt to put a lot of these products, in the meat counter, for example. And I think there's been some pullback on that. So I think there's still a lot of just unknowns on the retail front about where to put these products, right? Where they will have the highest velocity. I think availability too also speaks to food service. You'll see a plant-based option, 1 or 2 on most menus. I think we're going to continue to see more and more, again, going beyond the burger, looking at plant-based meat and dairy, in other kinds of applications. As well as other areas of food service like stadiums, airplanes, hotels, et cetera. Moving on to that second point, as Jenny pointed out earlier, consumers come to this category primarily for health, and consumers are starting to get more savvy about turning over the packages and really reading the labels and expecting better and shorter and cleaner ingredient decks. So that's something that we work on a lot at Kerry, really helping our customers clean up their decks and remove ingredients that, even though they might actually not be that bad, they might sound bad to the consumer, and that's what counts. Let's see, what's the third one? I can't actually see it. No compromise. So I think we've already touched on this, really just that the bar is super high for these consumers, especially given that most of them are not vegans and vegetarians, who I know, who was it, Carly? I think you mentioned that you're a vegan or vegetarian. I am as well. For me, the bar is super low. I'll eat anything. But for most of these customers, especially the ones who are flexitarian or omnivores, they're not willing to sacrifice. So we really need to help make these products as good as possible. Sustainability always comes up as one of the reasons why people are eating more plant-based. It still is lower, right, than other aspects, than like health and taste. But I think with the younger generations and having the Greta Thunberg effect, especially with Gen Z, I think we're going to see sustainability as a more important component. There's a brand, Corn. I'm sure you're all aware of them, QUORN. Over in Europe, they actually have a metric on the front of pack that shows how many greenhouse gas emissions it took to make that product. It's going to be interesting to see if that actually comes over to the US. So that could very well, drive and propel this category. And the last part here is future forward innovation. There are a lot of technologies that are being worked on around the world in areas like cell cultivation. So there are about, probably at least 200 companies globally that are using real animal cells to create cultivated, cultured, whatever you want to call it, meat. So it's actually real meat. They're still a little ways away from scaling up. There are a lot of barriers, for that industry to succeed, but it's very possible it will. And I think, the initial products to market will be hybrid. So they will be mostly plant-based with a little bit of the cells sprinkled in for that authentic taste. Precision fermentation is also a super exciting area of innovation. And this is really, creating animal-derived ingredients without using the animal. So using yeast or bacteria as the strain, the host strain. Plus, there are novel, production methods. I know there was a mention about high moisture extrusion. There are a lot of other kinds of technologies like shear cell that are being worked on over in the Netherlands, as well as just other methods of creating ingredients that have higher performance and better nutrition. Next slide, please. And so I think this is really just to show, at Kerry, we're constantly trying to think ahead. If we look at what's available now, we have over 1,100 vegan taste combinations. So this could be a vegan chicken flavor that has notes of drippings, And maybe it has some charred grill flavors and has a little umami kukumi thrown in. So really, when you put all of these different combinations together, we can get really close to the real thing. We're actively working on sodium reduction as well as sodium perception. Again, back to this high bar that consumers have. A lot of consumers are starting to realize that the sodium levels on a lot of the meat products are quite high, and the sugar levels are quite high on some of the dairy products. So that's something that we're actively working on with customers. But I think as we look ahead, what's coming down the road, methacellulose, again, is one of those dirty ingredients. It's a perfectly natural ingredient, but it doesn't sound so natural. We already have that work in place, and we'll be launching some solutions in the next year or so. And I think, looking at even further down the road, I mentioned precision fermentation. There's also mycoprotein. That's what corn, has basically been using since the 1970s. There are a lot of other companies coming onto the scene right now that are using mycoprotein to make whole muscle type products. A company called Meaty in Boulder and At Last in New York. So I think that's something we're definitely keeping an eye on. And in those products, that substrate rather has no inherent flavor. So they'll be looking for ingredient suppliers to help them turn that substrate into something that's actually craveable and edible. And then again, looking at the future, cultured cells still a ways off, but we think it's definitely something to consider. And technologies like 3D printing, there are already companies working on that as well. So a lot of excitement. Kerry is very much, on the forefront of ingredient innovation, and we're super excited to work with companies that are producing some of these technologies. Back to you, Amy.
Yeah, so that was all kind of our formalized content today, but this isn't office hours, so we definitely just want to keep as much time open as possible just to have any questions answered, just have a discussion. What are you guys seeing out there? Is it aligning with what you heard today? Just anything anyone wants to add or chime in about?
I have more of a question maybe to Allison. You were talking about how nutrition is becoming more and more important in these next generation plant-based meat alternatives or dairy alternatives. One thing that we're always asking ourselves is, do consumers care about things like complete protein, especially whether it's, a complete protein on its own or a blend? Or is that something that they're really never going to find? That's always a question on our mind as a protein company.
No, it's a great question. And Jenny and Amy, jump in if you actually know of any research on this. I mean, I think the preponderance of plant-based meat products still use soy as the protein, and I don't know whether that is because it's the cheapest, so the prices tend to be lower, or whether it's the most functional, or whether it's because it is a complete protein and consumers know that, and that's why they're choosing them. I do think, consumers who do know anything about nutrition know that they don't need to eat everything in one item, right? They can basically parse throughout the day to create that whole protein, that complete protein. So I'm not really sure. I think just by looking at the success of the products that are on the market today, soy is definitely on, still the leading protein, but pea is really having a lot of heyday, I think, because of just the lack of allergenicity. But Jenny or Amy, have you seen any research that points to that?
I would just chime in and say, I think it's really dependent on the application. If people are reaching for a plant-based indulgent mac and cheese, are they really thinking about, I'm going to get my protein through this versus reaching for that nutritional shake? Personalized nutrition or hospital nutrition, all those types of products, we tend to see the protein content really boosted up because of their, fundamental purpose. But I know I always say, right now we're just getting people to eat what's on the shelves. And once they eat it and it tastes delicious, then they're going to flip it over and start to really examine that label and see, okay, what is this actually doing for me? But Jenny might have some more specific research points.
Yeah, whenever we ask specifically on protein type, to Allison's point, we usually see soy and pea come up to the top. Again, when you look at this category, and it's a lot of flexitarians who are fairly new to the category, they probably weren't purchasing these products 3 years ago, even a year ago. They're very new to the category as it's growing. I don't know that there's a lot of consumer education that they know exactly what they're buying and what goes into it yet. They're still experimenting within this space. So when I say we see soy and pea still come up to the top, specifically when talking about meat-based, meat mimicking products, I think it's because it's a lot of what consumers hear and see out in the market. It's what they've experienced, so they're comfortable with it. And that's probably where we are today. We do hear the push of they would like the same nutritionals as they see in meat. Again, the same texture, the same flavor. Nutritionals are no exceptions, except again, they're wanting to feel like it's healthier. Now, we know a lot of the, especially like burgers, are a little higher in sodium than their counterparts, and that hasn't seemed to deter consumers to date. Will that get more scrutinized? Probably, as they get more invested in the category, but right now we're still very much kind of in that entry stage.
One last thing I'll say about nutrition too is that, up till now, most of the focus by manufacturers has been on macronutrients, right? How much fat, how much protein, and it's usually on a huge label on the front, 16 grams of protein. We have something called the Kerry Health and Nutrition Institute, and one of our nutritionists actually did a webinar recently that was really interesting, talking about the focus on micronutrients. And so I do think that's going to be a trend. I can't actually say that today consumers care whether they're looking at how much selenium or choline is in this plant-based burger. I don't think that's happening today, but I do think that's going to be a point of differentiation for some brands going forward. I mean, you've already seen, I think it's Impossible or Beyond started adding B12 over a year ago. So as more people incorporate plant-based foods into their diet, there is going to become a point where they are going to want to make sure that it's nutritionally equivalent.
I see George in the chat also just made a comment about seafood being the big push right now. Chicken has been worked out for the most part. We agree with that, and we kind of see it in our day to day. Hernan has probably worked a lot with all of those things. So good build there, George.
Yeah, I love that comment by George, because I mean, it's to me it segues into, if it has to be optimized for applications, it means that it'll drive the cost up, right? But we've seen, and we've seen ourselves as the learning curve is going, especially for flavorists and understanding these ingredients. At least we have built a library of ingredients that we feel of taste ingredients that we feel deliver on the specific attributes, let's say on beef or chicken or pork. I think it's not too far ahead when we can have a more accessible set of ingredients.
Yeah, I think as far as, I don't know if there's any work going on, as I know that there's yeast extracts out there that help to flavor meat analogs. I'm wondering as well if there's a way to use nutritional yeast in combination with some of the yeast extracts to kind of add the vitamins, like the B vitamins and some other nutrition to the meat analogs.
That's a great thought. I don't think I've worked anything in specifically like that, but it's I mean, I don't see why not.
I think I've seen that ingredient on a couple of the plant-based egg products, but not on the meat products.
Does Kerry have a line of yeast extracts that they use for flavorings in some applications as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Usually it's all under our flavor umbrella. So we would create either a custom blend, or we have that library specific that I was talking about and certainly uses those tools.
All right, perfect. Well, things are slowing down here. I know an hour is a long time for looking at each other on Zoom, but I see there Adrian's kind of posted all of our LinkedIn's. We hope you found today valuable. This is, I think Adrian said, one of the first plant-based conversations you guys have had during this mentor hour format. So it was really awesome just kind of set the tone here and have an hour chat with all of you guys. As follow-ups, I believe the deck, the recording, all that good stuff will be sent out to you guys and all the other people who weren't able to attend today. But like I said, keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out to any of us on any follow-ups or questions you may have in the future. Like I said, we just joined naturally, so we're really looking forward to getting involved and getting to know more of you guys and just seeing how Kerry can kind of fit with your work streams and just in the general world of food and beverage. There's a lot going on, and we see faces over and over again, so it's good to see some of yours today.